Hello there, and welcome back to the Pet Savvy. And if you're new here, welcome. Today's video is going to be an ultimate care guide for bearded dragons. Bearded dragons are known for always being the life of the party. They are smart, fun, and ever so curious, to the point where they will never stop exploring around the house to see what else you have in store for them. Bearded dragons can also be friendly enough that they can be welcome into any home whatsoever, and they're absolutely amazing for beginners thanks to how docile they are and how easily they can adapt to captivity. Commonly referred to as beardies, the bearded dragons can be found underneath trees in the wilderness of Australia, and they're known for the mouth-open smiles they have during the peak hours. Funny enough, they don't actually smile in order to convey any emotions whatsoever. Instead, they just smile because they want to cool off. On top of all that, bearded dragons are very easy to take care of since they can eat almost any leafy vegetables and insects, and depending on their preferences, they can either spend all of the day basically in the sunlight, or they can hide away in the shade. Regardless, the bearded dragon is by far one of the most popular reptiles to keep as a pet, and as the years roll on over, more and more people start to look into adopting or purchasing one of their own. If you are one of these people and you would like to find out more about the beardies, then keep on reading, because we decided to prepare a little ultimate care guide for you, showcasing everything there is to know about the bearded dragons, starting off with the history of the bearded dragon. Bearded dragons are known for being some of the easiest lizards to own and take care of, and as such they're considered to be some of the best exotic pets for beginner owners around. But before you can actually buy a new pet, we always recommend that you look through the animal's history so that you can better understand its significance. With that being said, the bearded dragon is known for being a native of the deserts of Australia, and it is part of the Agamidae family of lizards. Bearded dragons have their signature broad triangular shaped head and a pretty flat body. Their jaws and torsos are lined with scales, and they are a bit rough to the touch. Adults can grow up to be as large as 24 inches in length, and for the most part the males will be far larger than the females by a lot. Back when they were first discovered around 1926, they were given the name bearded dragons thanks to their gular pouch they have on their throat. When push comes to shove, the bearded dragon will flare its gular pouch, making it, as a result, its entire body seem larger and more threatening to its opponents. At the same time, the throat area tends to darken quite a bit, almost becoming blackish, resembling a beard even more so. Most of the dragons that you can purchase or rescue today are inland or central bearded dragons, although there are a total of 8 different species for you to choose from. So now we've talked about the history, let's move on to what is a bearded dragon. For those that don't know, the bearded dragon is a semi-arboreal native lizard of Australia that is known for living either directly in the trees or on the ground near the trees. You can refer to any of the 8 different species as members of the genus Pogona, even though they all used to be in the genus Amphibolorus, grouping up until recently. By far the most popular of the species is the Pogona viticeps, or the central bearded dragon. The reason for this is that it is by far the friendliest and most low maintenance one around. There are currently 3 main reasons as to why the bearded dragon is so popular amongst reptile owners, and they are the following. Bearded dragons can be found all across the US, which makes them very easy to acquire, and it also makes them quite affordable. They are quite hardy creatures as they can survive through most climates with ease, and they are capable of adapting to captivity pretty much overnight. Most other lizard species out there are nocturnal, so you will very rarely see them out during the day. This does not apply to the bearded dragons, however, as they are both active during the day and during the night, depending when they get their zoomies, of course. How to take care of a bearded dragon. But regardless, let's be honest here, if you clicked on this link, then chances are that you already know what a bearded dragon is and are simply looking for a new and exciting tips on how to properly take care of one. If that sounds like we're right on this, then this segment was made for you, as it will go through everything there is to know about taking care of a bearded dragon. Starting off with the 3 basics which your bearded dragon can't live without. A UVB lamp and an infrared lamp for heat. A lot of insects and leafy veggies on a daily basis to keep the small sized monster at bay. A glass cage which measures up to 36 feet. Now, as we're talking about how to take care of one, let's focus in on the tank. When it comes to the enclosure that your bearded dragon should stay in, we usually recommend that you go for a glass one with a screen top. It should be as large as 4 to 6 feet long, 2 feet wide and around 3 feet high. You will need to invest in the tank quite a lot, but it'll be worth it at the end of the day, since anything smaller than that will hinder your bearded dragon's growth and maybe even affect its health in the near or distant future. In order to make the lizards feel more at home, you will also need to replicate their natural environment by taking rocks and branches and scattering them around the place. These branches will also help give your pet enough shade to cool off during the heat. Lighting and heating. Being a diurnal lizard, most bearded dragons tend to sleep during the night and roam around during the day, but you shouldn't be surprised if they also like to switch things up just because they're bored. They also get their zoomies after all. Bearded dragons do require an ultraviolet light though in order to live long and happy lives. Without it and calcium supplements, the bearded dragon is at risk of getting nutritional secondary hyperparathyroidism and metabolic bone disease. UVB bulbs also should be monitored with a UV radiometer, and you shouldn't forget to change them every year or so. On top of that, you'll also need to invest into a 40 to 75 watt infrared bulb that will help the beardies bask properly. Do keep in mind, however, that most of this will be meaningless if your bearded dragon prefers natural daylight over them. If this is the case, then you should allow them to go outside, but only under close surveillance, since they can easily dash down out of your range and into the wilderness if you're not careful. You should also have 2 different climates in your tank, with one of them allowing the beardie to bask in the sunlight and the other allowing it to cool off. Your bearded dragon should catch on this distinction pretty quickly, and it should pick the better one eventually on its own. One of these sides should be around 95 to 105 Fahrenheit, while the other should be around 80 Fahrenheit during the day, but as the night comes you should reduce it slightly so your friend can get a good night's rest. At the same time, you may want to invest in heating pads. Place them underneath the tank so that you may prevent any rocks from getting too hot to touch. Also, make sure to keep a lookout at your bearded dragon, as they will show you whether they like living in the enclosure or not in no time. If the temperature is just right and they're currently basking in the heat, you should be able to notice the fact that their ribs have expanded to the point where they almost look downright flat. At the same time, if your bearded dragon's mouth keeps opening and they stay like that for long periods of time, then chances are that the tank is a bit too hot for them. The humidity of the tank is also quite important, as it should always float around the 30 to 40% mark. In order to make sure that it never surpasses or that it reaches that point, you may want to mist the tank every 48 hours. Of course, that at the end of the day though, the exact temperature and humidity you should be going for all depends on where you live and the bearded dragon you own, but typically the warmer the temperature, the higher the humidity you should go for. Substrate. When it comes to the floor that your bearded dragon will be walking over, you may want to opt for sand or gravel, just so they may feel more at home in the enclosure. At the same time though, do keep in mind that sand is not always the best choice, because your bearded dragon may accidentally consume some of which can result in a lot of gastrointestinal problems. As such, it is recommended that you opt for newspapers and paper towels if you want to keep your bearded dragons clean while also making sure that they don't ingest anything they shouldn't. Do make sure that you clean the substrate every now and then though, otherwise bacteria will start to grow on it, and before long your bearded dragon's health will be at an all-time low. So, just to reiterate, when it comes to the tank type, we believe that a glass tank with a screen top is the best. Lighting wise, you should go with UVB and infrared lights, and as far as the substrate is concerned, while going with sand or gravel is more authentic, newspapers are more practical and hygienic. Let's take a look at the bearded dragon's diet. As mentioned previously, bearded dragons are omnivores, so you can feed them a mixture of vegetables and animal protein in order to keep them healthy. Juveniles tend to be more insectivorous, but as they grow older and older, they will need bigger sized bread to keep them well fed. In general though, you should know that the insects that you feed them should always be alive, and they shouldn't be any bigger than the dragon's eyes. But regardless, these are the main fundamentals that should always be a part of your bearded dragon's diet. Water, insects, vegetables, flowers, fruits. Water is a no-brainer and it should be placed in a shallow container and refreshed on a daily basis to make sure that they are never dehydrated. Insects, on the other hand, will always make up around 25% of the adult's diet. This is why you should invest in a wide range of insects for them to not grow tired of eating the same thing over and over again. You can go for cricket, dubia roaches, superworms, phoenix worms, hornworms, silkworms, mealworms, grasshoppers, butterworms, and even waxworms if you want to add a little flavour to their meals. If you are incapable of feeding your bearded dragon any live insects, you can still go for freeze-dried insects, but just so you know, these typically don't have enough nutrients to get the job done. At the same time, feeding live insects to your bearded dragon means that you get to feed the insects beforehand too. This is very good for you as it means that you will be able to go through a gut loading phase before you feed the insects to the bearded dragon. The gut loading phase essentially implies that you take the insects and you feed them with a lot of nutritious food, which will in turn help the bearded dragon exponentially. Veggies, on the other hand, will be a much larger part of the adult bearded dragon's health, with it making up around 50 to 55% of their diet. We always recommend that you invest in at least 2 to 3 different varieties of leafy greens every day, just so that your bearded dragon never runs out of nutrients. By far the most popular leafy greens to feed your bearded dragon include romaine, dandelion greens, mustard greens, beet greens, collard greens, escarole and Boston lettuces. You may also go with carrots, squash, zucchini, broccoli and peas for around 20% of its remaining diet too. Last but not least, you'll want to invest into flowers and fruits. These should comprise less than 5% of the bearded dragon's overall diet, with the most popular flowers being the hibiscus and the squash blossoms, and the most popular fruits being melons, bananas, papaya and strawberries. Bearded dragon health problems. For the most part, as long as you have managed to properly manage your bearded dragon's aforementioned needs, you shouldn't have to worry about their health. You may want to trim their nails every couple of weeks or so though, and every year or so you can have a veterinarian check their teeth to make sure that nothing's wrong alongside the rest of their body. A fecal analysis will also help discern whether the bearded dragon has any intestinal parasite, and a blood work is always welcome to see if there is any need for any intervention. But regardless, these are the most common infections and illnesses that the bearded dragons will succumb to: adenovirus 1, coccidiosis, follicular stasis, metabolic bone disease, renal disease, and periodontal disease. Last but not least, we would like to mention the fact that as a pet parent, you should also make sure to check on your bearded dragon's mental health, as they could very well be suffering from depression if you're not careful. Depression for bearded dragons can be spotted from sunken eyes, weight loss, sudden loss of appetite, and overall weakness. If your bearded dragon's undergone any of these issues before, then you may want to contact a veterinarian to check them out. So, does the bearded dragon make for a good pet? Absolutely. It is a very easy pet to take care of, and while the original investment is quite high, you will not regret purchasing your very own bearded dragon anytime soon.